Go for it.
Okay, so one of the things that you and I talked about is that we do the podcasts on it's like an hour, sometimes less than an hour, but nearer an hour than it is anything else. And we both talked about the links between the charity and the podcast, and then also mine and your relationship in regards to the charity and what we do and what the charity does as a whole. And so one of the things we came up with was an idea to do very small little snippet things that we can post wherever we want to post in regards to mental health and be specific. So today perhaps might be a good idea to talk about what's mental health, what's mental ill health or unwellness, and what's mental health awareness, if you see what I'm saying. And I was kind of suggesting that that's where we start.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a good idea. And also, if anyone's got any questions, they can submit them for us to ask and answer.
And how would they do that?
They can email us.
Oh, that's a good idea. Do you want to fly that one out?
Yeah, we'll have the email address at the bottom of the video. But they can email info@somewherehousesomerset.org, and we'll pick it up and take it from there.
And I think one of the things that a caveat to that is that we're not experts in that sense. I mean, people would call me an expert because of what I do for a living, but I don't believe that I have all the answers, and I don't believe any of my answers necessarily fit anybody. But if they do, well, brilliant, and if they don't, well, that's life as well.
And everyone's unique as well. Everyone's got their own situation, and one line of question can't give you the background. It's a bit like taking a photo. You only see what you can see. Yeah. So but we'll try our best to help answer anyone's questions.
So I suppose that what is mental health? And it's arguably mental health is when you know about what's going on for yourself mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. But is that then ill health as well? And so there's a combination of both, really, because just because you notice that you're feeling particularly sad today, does that mean that you've got a mental illness, or is that defined as actually you're just human?
Okay, yeah. And I guess also, can you look at that as mental wellness or mental well-being, because you're very much in kind of control because you know what's going on?
Okay, I think control and your mental health doesn't always go hand in hand, because sometimes you're not in control of what's going on around you, which will alter your cognitive thinking, it'll alter your perception of things, it'll alter everything about you as a person. But is the awareness enough so that you can give yourself some choices?
Yeah, no, I see what you mean. So I guess the question is what's a good way for people to kind of learn about their own mental health?
And I think, is that chicken and egg? Do you recognise what influences your mental health? What has influenced it in the past? And is that still influencing you? Or on a day-to-day living life, whatever you want to call it, is that then also influencing you as well? So, for example, I did not want to get out of bed this morning, but I did because I went to work. Did I enjoy what I did this morning? Yes, I did. But that doesn't mean to say that I'm still not tired and feel like I could do with going back to bed, because I feel really exhausted.
Of course, yeah.
Is that linked to what's going on for me on a personal level? Yes, it probably is. Is that something that I want to discuss with somebody? Probably not, if you see what I'm saying. And is that going to influence me for a long period of time? Yes, it is. Do I need to do something about it? Yes, I'll do my best to manage that. But when it becomes a problem for me is when I ignore it, try and hope that it's going to go away, and then it doesn't go away, and then I end up spiraling into a further low mood. And I'm aware of that. So that awareness and linking that to mental ill health or mental awareness or mental wellness is all there. Because I think if you haven't got the insight to that, then you're not going to know what to do or what not to do.
Of course, that's it. And there's so many different factors that you just touched on that can affect your own mental health. I know that, when I've not slept very well, maybe I've been woken up early, or perhaps I've just had a bit of a restless night's sleep, I know that day is going to be a bit more challenging because I'm not my 100% self. And things, things come at you and sometimes you haven't got the ability to handle them. So have you got any tips for, how people can kind of check themselves? How can they go, oh, actually, no, I'm not feeling that great today. What can they do themselves? What sort of first aid, I suppose, can they do to themselves to help improve how they're perhaps feeling or acting in that particular day?
Okay, so my chair made a funny noise, and I apologise. It's a really good question, actually, and I think one of the good things about it comes back to who am I, where I am in the world, and what do I want to achieve in the day. And that's really important. But also, am I well enough to do that or not? And if I'm not well enough, which is what you're suggesting, then what do I need to do to improve that? And for example, we live in a very busy world, and there's lots of very busy people around us, and busy people don't always have the time to talk. So I find myself somebody that wants to listen and talk to me. I don't go to the people that are too busy or whatever and then feel rejected by them, because then that makes me feel even worse.
Of course, yeah.
If that makes sense. If your parents are really, really busy and they just are trying to keep their heads above water and pay the bills or whatever, then the reality is that actually I might need to go and see a counsellor, or might need to go and find a best friend or whatever. If I then find that kind of support, is it the right kind of support? Is it that I'm going to my best friend who's telling me all the things I want to hear, or am I going to seek out support from somebody who's going to tell me the truth?
Of course, and I guess, again, it all depends on everyone's individual situation and what the issue is at the time, but there's certainly good options for people to look at.
Yeah, and also nobody's perfect.
No.
And it's recognising that nobody's perfect, but we are also very much influenced by our past. And it's how much is my past impacting on me today, or is it my today's impacting on me today, if that makes sense. And if we constantly live in the past and don't resolve that past in some way, then the chances are, if there's been trauma, the chances are it will carry with us forever. It's not going to go away. You have to be able to find some resolution of that past to be able to improve your mental well-being.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And in terms of, sort of quick wins for people that kind of help alleviate perhaps how they're feeling in a particular moment.
Yeah.
I mean, in the past, when I felt particularly annoyed or angry, obviously removing myself from that situation is a good idea. But have you got any other tips for people?
Well, lots of people are very isolated, and we get very isolated in this environment, and partly because we isolate ourselves more than anything. Don't always recognise we're doing that. And I think that they didn't have these when I was younger. So things like podcasts, audiobooks, watching like educational stuff, reading a book, pottering around in the garden if you've got one, planting houseplants if you haven't got a garden, giving back, doing voluntary work. Even when you're anxious, it's about feeling the anxiety and going through it. If you see what I'm saying, great book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. I don't like everything that she writes, but certainly a large proportion of what she writes is really relevant to change. And it's about changing your circumstances. So if you're doing the same old, and you're feeling the same old, well, do something different. Whatever that is, it'll make you feel better.
And I guess the best one is to have a cup of tea with a friend, right?
Yeah. Says us having a cup of tea together.
That's it, yeah.
But, I suppose I'd ask you the same question. What do you do when you're feeling fed up?
Have a cup of tea.
Yeah. Pick up the phone. Talk to somebody. It's all of that stuff that you absolutely do it automatically. But when you've got into the habit of not doing it automatically, before you know it, you're back in that negative cycle, and it's a horrible spiraling thing. And sadly, some people don't survive that.
No, that's right, and it can be very difficult, again, depending on everyone's individual circumstances. But there's plenty of organisations and support out there that people can go to if they've kind of tried all of those other things and they're not working.
Yeah, and I also think that it's being open-minded. I've been to organisations and asked for help and thought, bloody hell, I'll never go back there. But then you find that absolute diamond person that's either part of that organisation or part of another organisation. They're bloody brilliant. They're absolutely fantastic. And you think, wow, thank you very much. I really needed that.
Yeah.
And that can trigger change quite significantly in somebody's life. And I also feel that you can't build Rome in a day. It's not all going to happen overnight.
No, that's it. I mean, I talked about quick wins, but they're not going to solve any underlying issues. They're going to help you feel better in the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely, people can't go and see a counsellor for 1 or 2 sessions and hope to be fixed. That's just not what's going to happen.
No, definitely not. I mean, it's time served. Sadly, you do have to put the time in, and you do have to build relationships with other people, including the relationship with yourself. I mean, mental unwellness is it still holds a stigma, sadly, more so for men than for women. And the suicide rate for men is very, very high. And part of that is because actually big boys don't cry, which we all know is not true. And they have pain the same as every other lady in the world or every other child in the world. They still have pain. And it's being able to actually voice that and give yourself permission to voice that appropriately.
Of course. And again, about having the right type of support, the right support from the right people, and all of those things, to have the courage and confidence to be able to talk about whatever's going on, and help work through a plan to make change.
I suppose I've got a question in my head. If you were in a position where you felt vulnerable, etc., do you have a list of people that you'd go to?
Not off the top of my head, no. But maybe that's a good thing to do. I'm sure I probably do have a list, but it's certainly not written down or at the front of my thought right now.
If you needed a new set of windows, do you have a list of people that you'd go to?
I do, yes.
Can you see the difference?
Yes, very much so.
And it's like, where do we put our own health and our own importance after our windows? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it's
that's a very good point.
Crazy, and that's the craziness about it.
It really is.
And it's if you've got an infection, you're going to treat it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So why don't we treat what's going on in our minds?
Yeah. Very, very true.
Equally.
Yeah, it's a very, very good point. I never really thought of it like that. And I imagine lots of other people listening or watching this may have the same view, that actually, it's not something that's high up on their list.
And the other thing is that expectation that everybody else is going to do it for you. So, I mean, you get fed up with listening to the government should, or the National Health Service should, or the should. And I hear that. They can provide as much as they like, but if you don't do the work, it's not going to change.
No, that's very, very true. Yeah.
It needs you to take the step forward. So like your windows are never ever going to get sorted if you don't actually pick up the phone and ask the window man to come and sort them out.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same as your own health issues.
Totally
And
agree.
It's a bit controversial and people probably get a bit grumpy with me about that, but it's a fact.
Mm.
And, I pay for my own therapy because actually I know the value of that. And people go, I can't afford therapy. You might not be able to afford therapy. There's plenty of organisations out there that give free therapy or a very small donational therapy. Like our charity, really.
Well, exactly, that's it. And we're currently seeing 150 plus people a week, which is phenomenal.
Oh, gosh, yeah. I think I was talking to somebody yesterday when I was at the park with the kids, and they said, they live in Burnham where the charity's been set up, and they said, oh my gosh, I can't believe that you see that amount of people. Just can't believe it. And they said they'd like to do some fundraising, and they want to do fundraising for a bigger organisation. And I said, well, why don't you just fundraise for your local charity?
Yes, yeah.
and that's another thing that people can do is fundraise. A lot of people who are at high risk are incredibly successful professional people. Mm-hmm. It's not just people that are on the breadline or one-parent families or people that are going through some form of change in their lives. It's not just those people. It can be just as successful people who are as vulnerable as the most vulnerable in other ways.
And they may have different issues. It may be pressure of work and relationships. It could be some kind of childhood trauma. It could be anything that unfortunately hits them, and is when they need that support.
Yeah, I agree. And it's just making sure that you've got those people on your list.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's having that list of people. I mean, even if it's a Samaritan's telephone number that's on the end, or your local mental health services, or your GP, or just somebody that you think you can go and talk to. I also don't think people always understand that the systems that are in place when you have a mental illness or unwellness, whatever you want to call it, there is a system, and very often the system starts with your GP. Your GP will then prescribe if they feel necessary, and they will then recommend, hopefully, they should recommend some form of support. If they don't, then at that point, that's the time to go and get support. It's the best time to get support then. But if they feel that you're acutely unwell, they will refer you to the local services. But the local services have other services that they can refer to. They might not think that you actually have a mental illness as such, but actually just are struggling at this moment in time and just need a little bit of extra support. So they will farm you out to somebody else, or recommend you go somewhere else, refer you, whatever the words you want to use, to get that help. And it's worth just trying it out rather than dismissing it and thinking you should be treated in a certain way. That can often be linked to how we're feeling, our state of mind.
Of course, yes. Yeah, people need to have the confidence to be able to go and reach out confidentially.
I think you've just hit the nail on the head. It's having confidence, and a lot of the time people don't.
No, exactly that.
They don't have, sadly, and it leads to really awful things as well. So I think that's being aware that, if somebody reaches out to you, just give them the hand of kindness back, because very often that can be
a first step.
Yeah, definitely. But also it's about being kind to yourself as well. And what do I need and what do I deserve?
Of course, yeah.
Should we call it a day there?
I think so, yeah. Thanks very much. And we'll just repeat that email address, info@somewherehousesomerset.org. If you've got a question that you'd like us to ask on the podcast, we'll obviously do it anonymously. And it'd be great to get any feedback. Thank you.